doing a portrait today, kind of a profile of a gentleman from San Juan Capistrano. I painted him once while I was there, once back in the studio from a different thing. And so I thought I'd do something a little different since I haven't done pretty much focus on a figure and a head for a while. So I thought we'd take that. Sketched it out in on a 2024 piece of hardboard. A lot of you guys ask me questions. It's just gessoed and painted kind of a gray brown color. It's about that thick, and sketched it out with a charcoal pencil. Kind of threw a little spray fix on part of it. So, and that's why I sketched it out ahead of time. I didn't want to spray fix it. If I'm going to do a finished portrait for a client, I'm going to do a much better drawing. This is more like I would do if I were doing a quick location piece. So keeping an eye on the time, we're going to lay a background in very quickly, just kind of almost washy, I think. And then we'll proceed to the figure and then maybe get back to the background a little bit. Any little squeaks and squeals that you might hear in the background is our favorite grandson, Jude, who's happened to be here. So let's get going. Let's get a background in there. A little, let's see, I use 3 colors. Asphaltum, little Naples yellow, and a little ultramarine blue. And I always kind of throw that in there just to temper it. And it's real washy. Do you see that? Oh, very thin, very washy. So we can kind of block that in very quickly. And I kind of want it to be super loose. I have an overall concept in mind as I approach this thing. Number one, I want the background to be very loose and relatively thin and very painterly. And I want the figure to be quite free until we get towards the head, in which case I want to be a lot more refined. So that's it in a nutshell. So I usually start with a plan in my head, and that's my plan. Whether it works or not, we'll see. You guys get to bear witness whether this whole thing works. So they're same 3 colors, a little bit more turp this time. Again, I want to be real thin and washy right here. I just kind of envision that in my own mind. Got to move this a little to the left so I can see the front of my reference. Lose it into the face a little bit if I have to. I kind of always prefer that rather than to paint right up to the edge. I said something in class one time and a student remembered it. I never remembered it. And during one of my workshops, she mentioned something she had remembered from class. And that was that I had always said paint through, not to. Which means you don't just paint up to that edge like you're putting puzzle pieces together. Paint right on through it. And that forces your paint to be a little bit more harmonious. Now I notice it gets a little darker as it goes down, so I'm going to just lay off the Naples and add a little bit more ultramarine to it. And we'll just take it that direction so we can get some nice tones in the background. The reason I want to do this, then I know kind of the values and colors that I kind of want to get that figure in there with. If I don't have this in here, then I have to kind of work the background and make it work to the figure. And I find it easier for myself to, as I've said many times, kind of set the stage and then eventually finish. Also, if you're doing a study from life, the model's going to get up and walk away eventually. Your background won't. It's going to stay there. So you do have that advantage. The other thing that's really nice if you're painting from life, if you're painting like let's say a 90-minute painting like we're doing here, very few models are going to sit there and hold it for 90 minutes. So what you can do is when the model breaks, you work on the background. Because your background doesn't take a break. Okay. So we got the basic darks in. This is basically almost the kind of light I want. Not too worried about this because it isn't adjacent to the figure, but I think I will get a little bit of a green character in there. So we'll take a little green, mix it right into that color I was just using, throw a little ochre into it. A little too dark, a little Naples into that. And just, it's a nice start. That's all I'm shooting for right now is a nice start. And I kind of like this thin to thick concept. Hey, Jude. To quote the Beatles. So we're just going to get some of that greenery back in there. And there's some stuff up in here, not as green. So I'm just going to take the same color and bring a little bit of a burnt sienna into that color. And we'll just kind of go up in here and just kind of scrub around a little bit. Very kind of abstracty. Kind of like some of the drippy underpainting that I got going up the top there. I don't mind that at all. I want a little more dark up there. Very wet paint. Wet meaning watery, kind of because of the terp that I've thrown into it. So it's a lot. So that number 12. Okay, let's go. Let's get into the figure now. Got enough of this kind of garbage going on here. A little perspective. It's the first accurate thing I've had to do. Everything else I could be pretty free about. Okay. First thing I'm going to do, I'm going to paint this guy's vest. Probably the last thing that most of you would concern yourself with. But I'm not going to, I don't like this robin's egg blue kind of color. It detracts and it competes, you know, blue and orange being complements. It kind of competes back and forth. It just doesn't feel harmonious. So I'm going to make it more of an olive color. So I'm going to take brown. I'm going to take the green, a little bit of ochre. Like somehow I snuck some red in there. I didn't want it, but let's go back, counter that with a little green, a little bit more ochre. I got what I want here, I think. Okay, yeah, I like that. Let's at least start with that. A little bit more green maybe, and a little bit more ochre. Hi. I actually have an art critic here. He's kind of so you see we're getting this in there quick. There's a nice shadow. Shadow's going to be much darker. Just scrub that in at the bottom. As the further away I get from that head, the more kind of free I want it. The more edges I want free, the laying of paint. So we're going to darken that green with some brown, with the actually asphalt, and very, very dark. He doesn't like what I'm doing right now, so I'm going to try and make this look better to keep him happy. That didn't do it. I had too much of the light color in there. There's a nice dark. Let's try it again. Okay. Threw a little ultramarine into that also, because I know when you paint shadows, generally you get a little sky influence. This guy's outside, so it definitely is going to have some cools. So we go kind of get that shadow thrust in there. Kind of want to lose, just let that edge be kind of free. I'll find it later if I need to. Sometimes it's actually more fun to let things go a little bit crazy in the beginning. Usually, that's basically my approach to landscape work. But I kind of like to do figure work that way too. Be a little bit. I used to be a precise figure painter where I wanted everything 100% accurate right from the beginning. And thankfully I outgrew that. So we're going to get the hat in. Let's at least get kind of that hat. that color tends to be kind of warm. So I'm going to take a little bit of raw sienna, which has quite a lot of yellow into it. Got to throw a little bit of the asphaltum to darken it. Stays kind of warm, but it's not as warm as the, so I threw a little blue to mellow it down a little bit more. And it's probably not as dark as I wanted, but let's see. Got to remember what this color is. That's not white. Keep that in mind. This is a tone. And I've shown you guys in the past this, so I'm just going to grab a white right here and lay it right next to it so you can see that's white. This is actually off-white, and that's, so that gives you an idea of the value of that background, or the tone that I'm painting on. So we're working with a number 12 rosemary brush. Perfect brush for something like this. I mean, I could go and use my gesso brush in the beginning, which is fine, but because I'm not doing trees, I'm not doing, I'm using the rosemary, which I tend to use really when I want more control. In this case, you can also use it right in the beginning and be kind of crazy and free with it and keep it out of control. A little bit more raw sienna, now a little bit more of the asphaltum because it gets a little darker. Nah, still darker. Whoa, I may have made that too dark. Let's see. No, I guess I didn't. It looks it on my palette, but apparently it's not. So we're going to come up here and here. Gets really dark back in there. So we're definitely going to be coming over that. No question in my mind. That's going to be darkened. And a little bit more red up in this area right here. Front of the hat. Add a little bit of green to that color just to darken it because I had a lot of red in it. Green being the complement of red. I know it'll darken it and it'll gray it at the same time. And way in the back, I can take the asphaltum, the ultramarine blue, and get really dark right here. Right here. And the hat just, we're going to let that hat kind of get lost in the head itself. So it's going to go up here above the ear. Again, this is the super dark. Up here, and where that goes in, I can pop out some of that later if I want. Paint things in the beginning. Don't separate them as much. Keep them more unified. Simplify, in other words. If you see two tones and they kind of go together, paint them together. You can separate them later if you need to. You may find you don't need to. And it really, some of this is really based on your overall intent, what it is you're trying to convey in your painting. Maybe your whole concept is to simplify. So we've got the beginning of a lay-in. Now we're going to kind of begin to lay in some of the, I'm going to do a few landmarks. The eyebrow being one of them. Boy, I love that eyebrow, by the way. That's going to be fun right at the end to really, really get a nice, wonderful gestural stroke out of that. So now we're going to mix up. I'm going to base the shadow tone down into two basic tones. There are subtleties within it all over the place. Warms, cools, all kinds of things that I'm going to play with. But initially, I'm going to look at this shadow tone, which is a deeper tone, and this shadow tone, which is a lighter tone and a little bit more red. So I'm near that dark right in this area. But if I throw some more burnt sienna into that, I may hit it all by, yep, I have. I was going to say I may get it without adding any other color. And we're kind of slowly let it kind of blend. The delineation area tends to be the fold right at that point. And that gets a little bit of dark in here, a little bit of dark down in here, and up here. And then we go to the lighter tone. The lighter tone, I'm going to use raw sienna, a little bit of burnt sienna. And I'm going to start with that, I think. Whoa, pretty close. Son of a gun. I think I might want to cool it just a touch with the blue. And we'll see what we end up with. I'm going to start with this. A little bit, it was a little dry, so I added a little bit of terp to that. Boy, I can see lighter, subtle, as I begin to look at this, I can see lighter areas, darker areas, and those are the areas I want to manipulate back into this color. But initially, this is where I want to start. Back here, up over the bridge of the nose. And we're going to lighten that later. Up around the eye. And the ear is pretty much the same color. So we're just going to kind of smear that ear right over my drawing. You know, I tell people this, particularly when you're painting from life, in a quicker painting. Don't be afraid to cover your line. Your line might have been wrong in the first place. And by the time you get things from line to mass, it takes on a whole different look. So I've got a dark that I can come in right here, right there, a little bit of a dark right there. So we start to build a little bit into that. As I go back to my reddish tone, come down on the wing of, or the bottom of the nose. I was going to say, and the wing, and I cast a shadow, and we'll lose, look at all the fun drips. And I don't know if I want to keep those or not. I don't think I'm going to. You can do a couple things with that, by the way, just let you know. Here's one of the things you can do. So if the drips, if they bother you, if they don't bother you, leave them. There's a lot of people that use drips as part of their style, their signature. But you know, I generally don't. Whether that's good or bad, I'll let you be the judge. A little bit more raw sienna into that, so it lightens up just a little bit. There's some warms and cools in here. I will get to those. Not right now. Right now, it's about getting the lay-in correct. And when I say correct, I mean relatively correct. It's not going to be right where I want it because that's where I'm going to make my adjustments. That dark, just mix that dark right into the reddish color and let them merge together, kind of where the sideburn would be. Okay, so we start to get the overall feel of this character. Now, one of the things that I want to do is on the collar of his shirt, carry that shadow from his that you see on his vest. I want to carry that shadow up on that shirt. So what did I do? I mixed a little blue, a little burnt sienna. And I'm just trying to kind of match the color and the value that I see there with this 12. At this, it comes about here, and then it continues up here. So I don't want to over render it, but I would like it to be and it gets really dark back here. So I went back to the dark and we'll just pull it right down in there. All right. So we start to get the light dark patterning in this character. The only thing we're lacking is in the shirt. So if I want the shirt really white, maybe I want it a little bit lighter than this. Then I want to make those shadows a little bit darker. So again, I'm going to take some ochre, some ultramarine blue, some burnt sienna, because I want them a little bit lighter than this. Let's see, that's a little bit lighter. And they're kind of warm. Whoop. Boy, throw that burnt sienna in there sometimes. That goes so warm on you. It just goes beyond where I was hoping. So let's start about here. That feels pretty good to start with. Get a little bit of a shadow down underneath, down here, down here, down the back of his arm, little divots, pulls in the shirt. Just kind of indicate them in there right now. Number one, I don't want to over refine it anyway. So a little bit of a light touch there to give a little bit of light on the crown. Right up front. I don't want that edge to get too sharp on me. And I'm going to mix that in kind of with this shirt shadow color so we get an in-between tone. Maybe even bring a little raw sienna into that, but a little bit of toning right in here so we get a little bit of a, for lack of a better word, I don't like to use the word blend, but in essence, that's kind of what we're doing, creating kind of a blend there. And then with add a little bit. Now this gets a little bit lighter. So I'm going to squeeze the paint out of my brush and just go over that. Whoop. I don't like what I just did. There we go. Okay, leave it alone for right now. So when I say leave it alone, in my mind, here's what I'm saying. It's good enough for right now. Okay, so I'm not saying, man, that's really good. And I'm not saying, whoa, I'm way off. I'm saying it's good enough for right now. It's close. It's close to where I want to be. And if I feel I need to, I know I can adjust it later. So this part of the hat is not facing upward as much, and therefore it's not as bright. And that's why we have, that's why what I did is I added more raw sienna to the color. And we'll take and kind of work that out just a little. All right, I'm going to leave it alone. I don't want to overdo it. I'd rather underdo it, and if I need to later, come back and make it look really cool. Right now, but you know, I might end up liking the fact that it's just indicated. And so I don't know. And I'm not going to make that assessment at this moment. With the same color that I used up here, I am going to, with this 12, believe it or not, hit a little bit of a rim light here, all the way down to there. Now, that's very heavy-handed. So I can take up another brush, trim it down, boom, just like that. So don't be afraid to make these strokes that might feel a little clumsy. You can easily go back and fix those things. And I do mean easily. It's not outrageously difficult to do that. So we got a little bit of rim light on the hat, which to me is good. Looks like this could probably come up higher, but I don't want to deal with that for right now. So I'm going to go down to a little bit of a smaller brush, a little bit more of a control brush. It's a number 8. So I went from a 12 to an 8, right? And I'm going to take this 8 and I'm going to clean up a little bit of some of these areas right in here. Just paint over them. The next thing I'm going to do is I am going to put that eye in, which I left out. And I'm not really sure why I left that out. I shouldn't have. So let's put it not as dark as it'll end up. Okay. Keep it a little looser than you think. Now, when we start to look at the lights, we can say there's a transition light, there's a super bright light, there's an in-between. We're going to kind of go for that in-between right off the bat. And I'm going to use ochre. I'm going to use a little bit of burnt sienna. Those two colors work really well for making a base flesh tone. Generally, it's going to probably be a little too dark, a little bit too red. But, you know, I'm going to amplify some of the color as it is anyway. So let's start right here and see if that looks pretty good. It's maybe a little bit more yellow than I want. So just brought a little bit more. I brought a little red into that color. And I want to grab it up here on the top of the nose. And then on the wing of the nostril, knowing that this is too dark. I'm giving you my thought process. I know that I'm planning for the stage beyond this. And what do I mean by that? The stage beyond this is going to be lighter. Fix that eye in there. Now, same color. I don't like to vary it too much at this particular time when I'm painting quickly. If I'm painting slow, I might really sit down and figure out all the nuances right off the bat, because I have the luxury of time. And I mean that, I do mean that as a definitive statement, the luxury of time. I'm using that terminology because of my illustration background. Those of you guys that are out there that were illustrators or still are know exactly what I mean by the luxury of time. So I use some more red. Oh, I like that red. I like that red a lot. Let's bring a little bit of it into the nose. It starts to warm it up. One of the things I want to do is get a few subtle darks, not as dark as I want, but right around here on that upper lip. His teeth, I actually see his teeth back in there, believe it or not. So I probably will put those in there. Let me talk a little bit about the drawing stage of this. I work a lot with straight lines, working that angle to that angle. If I want to change it, and I'm off here, this goes up a little higher. And so I will do a lot of things. I don't try and do a perfect, that's a different way of drawing. And when I'm drawing for the sake of painting, I draw a little bit differently than I do when I draw for the sake of drawing, where it's going to end up as a drawing. I have found that works best for me. I work in a more indicative fashion if I'm drawing for a painting, using a lot of straight lines to get things down where I want them. So I'm getting the look of I'm going to switch over to a number 8 filbert. It's a brand new brush, by the way, brand new. It's not now. I just messed it up. He has I have his nose way too sharp, but I kind of like that, so I don't care. It isn't what we would call an exact portrait, but when I do things like this, truthfully, I want more. I will paint more for caricature than I will for the accuracy of portraiture. Because unless I'm doing a commission portrait where I'm doing it for somebody or I'm doing some sort of documentation, I want the painting to look interesting. So I've darkened that eyebrow with, and I'm going to flare it out, bring it up. He has some loose hairs, which is just going to kind of indicate them like that. eyebrow comes all the way down, actually goes back, and then flares out way too much. That's still, I kind of like it. Character. Now you gotta be careful because you can write a lot of crap off to character. You could say, "That was character. I was just trying to build character." But if it doesn't look good, it doesn't matter if the character's there. It still has to feel relatively accurate. So we're indicating the interior ear canal, just as I see it. Simple. And all I did is took my dark and added a little bit of alizarin. Whenever I put, as I like to say, whenever you put a hole in the figure, a nostril, separation of lips, a crease, warm it up. Warm it up. Otherwise, it'll look like someone smeared ash into it. So it's really helpful to warm it up. It's probably all we're going to deal with in that for right now. But I took that color, mixed it in. We're going to start to indicate a few of the subtler darks in here and add a little bit. So what I'm doing, because I set it up quickly, I've allowed myself to play and kind of fuss around on that face relatively soon, because I've got everything else setting more or less the way I want it. And if I don't get back and refine and finish it, I need to do a little bit back in here, no question about it. So let's go back and build a few subtleties within this. Now, this is a medium tone. A medium tone means I got both directions I can go. I can build darks into it and I can build lights into it. In both cases, they're going to be subtle. So if I follow this up, it gets a really nice little pull right there. Up here, a little bit softer. That's too dark. So all I got to do, because it's wet paint, is push that color right back into the paint that's already there. A little bit below his ear. This is where you begin to look for subtle modeling. Below his cheekbone, right here. Okay, so you start to build structure into what was a relatively flat shadow plane. And I look carefully, I see a little bit right here. I look right down from the eye. I know kind of where to look for things. All right, now let's take and add a few little lights into him. Like down in the chin area, there's a lot more that can go on. For example, we can create a little bit more of a core. Before it goes into deep shadow. Be a little more careful right around this lip area now. So what you begin to see is this head start to build out, and it's still very underdone. So I'm going to take raw sienna, a little bit of my burnt sienna. I'm going to see what that looks like without adding, because I can see a little bit more light. Oh, that's not bad. This is a harder color. These are the more difficult colors because they can't pop too light and they can't be too foreign in color. And I mentioned earlier that I was going to do a little manipulation because I see it right there. And we're going to be a little bit darker. I'm going to start to hit some right here. So I'm being much more careful at this point. I'm not being as freewheeling with that brush as I was in the beginning. Go back. I'm going to add some blue to these flesh tones. Whoop, I added too much. I want to cool some areas off, like right in here. And as it works its way, generally You could, males, it'll be much cooler as you get into the muzzle because of the shading, such as in here. So there's a little bit of blue thrown into this color now. Back to the warmer aspects of those colors, the raw sienna, the burnt sienna. And what I want to do is see what I can do right, because the light comes here and then he picks up just a touch right there. And right there. So we're building structure. I want to build a little bit more into the cheekbone. A little bit more of the burnt sienna, but right about here. And here. A little bit in the temple region. A lot of times it'll get cool off in the temple region too. So we're still a long way from getting light. Okay. That's kind of an important thing to realize. We're now, how far away are we? So let me grab a sable and show you what I mean. I've been putting my little finger down, so you end up with these little marks. That's pretty easy to go back and fuss. Because eventually that area on his nose is going to come out probably about that light. Now, I'm going to leave that there for a little bit because you notice right now it looks really wrong. I recall a student I had once that was really working on developing his portraiture for his graduate. And he painted everything and it was like, everything was just set up. And I kept telling him, I said, everything is set up beautifully, but you're not finishing. And so I went up to his piece and I put a brighter light on it. And he went, ah! I kind of enjoyed that. A little bit of a scare tactic. But then I showed him, that's because I only put it in one spot. Once I get that placed around and start to move it, it is not going to look like a bright spot. It is going to look like a light. So I'm just going to leave that there for right now because we're going to build the rest of the head up to that level. All right. This, I know I'm going to have to come back in. I want to come back with kind of a gray violet in here. I can see a nice color. That value is fine. Color is a little bit different. So I'll scumble a color back into that. But let's go in and let's take a look with where's my 8? Right here. I'm going to stay with this 8 for a little bit. A 6 would do really nicely, but I think I can stay with the 8 for a little bit here. And I'm going to be a little careful here. We're going to pick up ultramarine. We're going to pick up blue, and we're going to pick up alizarin. 3 of the darkest colors on my palette. And I'm going to brace. I'm going to be much more careful. I'm going to do a placement right now of that nostril. That looks about right, I think. Now, where else am I going to see a color that dark? Back near the corner of his mouth. And as it works into his lip. So we're building a darkness. Now, I can dwell on the face, but what I want to do is I want to set that background up a little bit better. So I'm going to go back to my number 12. I'm going to mix up blue, ultramarine blue, a little bit of alizarin, some Naples yellow to lighten it, and the Naples will mellow it, that violet out, so it won't be quite as piercing as. So it's a gray violet. I want to check the color. First thing you do is check color and value. Man, I hit the value right on the nose. So we're going to go in and we're going to clarify. And we're going to clarify some edges a little bit now. If it's I added a little bit of medium to it. I'm restructuring the nose because I had the bridge of the nose out too far. Just kind of, I'm going to add a little bit more red to that. Not much, little alizarin, a little bit maybe of burnt sienna. And I want to kind of let some of that brownish color come through. And about almost at the nose, I want to let it go a little darker. Also, as we move up. So I'm going to add, maybe let's just throw a little asphaltum into that color and let it move up here. And I might as well take the same color, maybe throw a little bit of blue into that. And as we start down from this point, we're darkening. So I'm going to go in and be much more careful. And as we move down, I keep making it a little bit darker until that's too dark. Too dark, too fast. So we just kind of push it back into the other paint. A little darker right here, a little darker still. I messed up. I cut away too much of his chin. His chin actually comes down here. Hate it when I mess up. I usually call myself names when I mess up, but I won't do that in front of you all.
It's a good teaching tool, though.
Huh? What's that?
It's a good teaching tool, so you can show how you get yourself out of it.
Yeah, I did that on purpose just so I can show you how I can. Now, sometimes it's good that, and I like to tell people whenever I demonstrate when I do mess up in my own mind, because that's what's going through my head. And basically what I'm trying to do is verbalize what's happening in my mind. Kind of a nice modeling going on in that region. So it's not a flat, harsh tone. Well, I've got that nice dark kind of nebulous color that's not real warm and not real cool. Just come in and straighten that out a little bit.
Yeah.
Some stains in the architecture. So that's just a matter of bringing some strokes down. Okay. I'm saving this. It's not as important. So what I'm saving that because at the very end, if I have 3 minutes left, I can pop that in. It's one of those areas people aren't going to look at. But now that I told you, you guys will probably look at it and say, look where I messed up. Okay. Okay, let's go back into his face a little bit. I went away from it long enough. Kind of feel like you know what? I need this light back here. Now, that light is similar to this light, but I don't want it as pretty. So by pretty, I mean, I'm going to cool it off and not make it as obvious of a color. So it's going to be a little more neutral, but still light. Maybe like that. So let's, for right now, just pop that in there. I hate for things to get too hard-edged and rigid on paintings that I'm keeping a lot more expression in. You know, if I'm doing a super refined portrait, different story, different story. Now, a little bit of delineation, not much. Can I just take that same color, darken it, and add a little bit, maybe more sienna, but I still want it to be very neutral. Looks, I can see a lot more warmth in it, but I still want enough neutrality where the color doesn't become dominant, and we want to delineate this side of it. That's fine. Fine. Bring it over a little bit. Okay, let's leave that alone just because I don't want to overplay that. If I have time, I might go back into it. These are the kind of areas that I might kind of decide later on. I need a little bit more in there or something. You know, you just don't know. If you over render it at first, then that means you have to over render the face. And I want the face to be spontaneous, but at the same time, refined. And if it sounds contradictory, it kind of is, but I want it to look like I've refined the face, but not that I've sat down and really worked hard and rendered it. I hope that makes sense to everybody. I'm going to cool off a few things in the shadow area, like right about here. A lot more neutral, a little blue there. I like that color. We get some, and he needs some color variation in his face. Starting to look very red on red on red, and there's a lot of subtle. And this is a matter of, I mean, I hate to say it this way, but it truly is. It's really a matter of experience and knowing what you can get by with. And generally, you have to do it wrong a few times before you get it right. I hate to tell you that. And I actually don't hate to tell you that now that I think about it, because I did it wrong a heck of a lot. And I want you to go through. No, I don't. I was saying I want you to go through the same kind of painstaking problem solving that I did. I really don't wish that on anybody, but I know it's inevitable. It's just something that you're going to do. A little bit of reflective light right in here, a little cooler. Okay. You got to stand back when you start popping that reflective light in. I'll tell you why. You can really overdo that. And that's something a lot of people will do. They will really, it drives me insane when I see things like that. You don't want to overdo reflected light, but I do want to get a little bit of reflected light in and around that nostril. And where is that? It's right. It's there. It's probably a little bit more than I needed, and it works its way under the nostril. And that's about it. All right, so what do we do here? Take this tone, soften it a little bit. Just now, let's start to bring the lights out a little, as I talked about. As we come down into the chin, I'm going to bring the lights out, but I'm going to make them cooler. So I'm going to use almost a mixture with a little blue in it. So we're going to come down. You can use green too. Here. There. And same with on the upper lip. Let's do the same thing, particularly right back in this corner of the muzzle, which separates the laugh line, the cheek, right there, from I keep standing back because I want to see if I need to push it more or if I've pushed it too much. So every now and then I will pop back just to see, because I'm not sure. Everything you do when you paint, and I think probably a lot of you guys realize this, but don't think this way, is a test. As you paint, you're testing. You're giving yourself permission to try something. You know, you can fall into these wonderful formulas, and I think everybody kind of needs a formula, but I also think everybody needs to kind of feel that like they can push themselves out of this formula. Otherwise, you just stay in what I call a rut. I know a good friend of mine was taking a workshop with somebody who was having them lay 13 to 15 colors out on their palette when they were used to working with a super limited, like a 4-color, 6-color palette. And when I was speaking with her, I said, what are you doing? I mean, she said, well, I want to be pushed out of my comfort zone. You know what? That's a pro. That's a pro. That's somebody who wants to try things. And so I try and come up with little exercises that I give to classes, and then I usually give them to myself first to see if it's going to work, and then I'll turn around and give it to a class. And just, you know, sometimes I'll just say, okay, you can use white and one color. Say I got too much reflected light there. That's where it pops out too much. So what I'll do is take my brush, clean it off, pick up some of this other flesh tone, and just bring it right over it. So you don't have to sit there and fret. You know, I'm in control enough where I can go back and try things. And if they don't work, so I brought some cool in there. That actually helped. I need some more warms down in here. I need to start pushing some more lights on him, and I told you I was going to. So let's push a few more lights on him. So ochre. Oh, my art critic's back. So we're going to hit on the wing of the nostril very delicately. Pull down from here. I don't like what I just did. I'm going to leave. So we're starting to get the light hitting on the nose. I don't like that light spot. So we're just going to push it back. But that light, the same kind of light that I'm doing right now, tends to filter over onto his cheek. So we're going to do that. We're going to bring it right over here. Not quite as light. I toned it down a little bit. So we can start to see how maybe I started with that bright light, but as soon as I added enough other bright lights into it, it started to not stand out so much. And that's what the point I was trying to make with that is when you first put it on, you only put it in one spot. Yeah, that's going to look wrong. But if you get it into enough areas, it will start to work. So I'm going to add a few subtle darks, not more. It's a nice little chisel type of a brush that I can use. We can start to build. Now, as I stand back, I can see a lot more going on right here. And to get that area, I'm going to take that burnt sienna, mix. I don't want it to be too, but I do want some lighter lights here. Nowhere near as light as these. Actually have an additional color on my palette today that I use often when I'm doing heads, and that is Mars Violet Deep. It looks like burnt sienna, but it's a darker, duller color. So the kind of strokes that I'm using now are much more controlled, because the closer you get to completion, the more controls you want to. Now, the problem occurs very often when you start bringing so much control that everything becomes rigid and it just doesn't feel correct. And when that happens, I will go back and I'll smear an area back and then paint it back out again. Like there, I want to bring some more cool into that. As I stand back, that starts to feel pretty good. Don't like this part of the eyebrow right here. So I go back to that base shadow color. Just kind of lose it. There's that beautiful angle. It's more like that. Kind of like some of these clumsy strokes up in here. Happy with it. I like it because what it does, it makes the face feel more focused. All right, let's decide now. Let's decide now on a color. Looks pretty close to this color. I kind of like it. It's not bad. It's gonna work. It's white, little ochre or Naples mixed into it. Just a touch of blue. It's pretty light. And I think I'm gonna add a little bit of medium safflower at this point. And let's test it right here. That may be a little brighter. I may want to brighten this up. I don't know. I'll tell you once I get that shirt in there. Can't make that decision yet. But I can see this tone is going to come more here. So we want the continuity of that cast shadow. I like the looseness there. Very happy with the wetted to wet kind of characteristic. Okay, feels good. That feels too dark for that. But so I will adjust that. Again, what I'm doing, when I'm telling you what I'm thinking. So I'm evaluating as I paint. And we'll do the adjustments. You can call them adjustments, refer to them as corrections. It's going to work. Probably didn't mix up enough of that color, but I'm not too worried about it. Got a little bit of white, yellow ochre. I'm remixing. Didn't have enough of it mixed up. A little touch of blue to mellow it. I'm pretty close to where I want to be. A little bit more blue. That's pretty close. Let me see. Yeah, pretty darn close. Add the medium. Probably a little more yellow in it than I wanted. Get around it. Let the mixtures kind of come in between. If you find you mix it, like every now and then you get an area like this, kind of falls, kind of push it back into the paint. Like I don't like 1, 2, 3, tell you right now. That's something I look for. When I find myself doing that, I definitely want to correct it. You don't only paint one way. I'm not just painting the lights. When I mix up a color similar to the dark and pop that in there. Other than that, which I will go over 2 or 3 times to knock it back. Put it back in, take it back out. Put it back in, take it back out. Until it feels like it's kind of complete. I told you I didn't like that. So let's lighten that up a little bit. And warm it up. That's actually pretty good. Some more ochre. Maybe we can bring a little bit more red into it because it's getting some reflection from his flesh tones. So that's where we do readjustments. Because very often, I think I mentioned it, you're wrong the first time. Sometimes the second time. Sometimes the third time. And so on and so on. A little bit more refinement. This gets a little ragged. Looks a little narrow here compared to down here. Fix that in a second. Go back to this color, base color. Fix that. That looks a little bit better. I can pronounce a little bit more light on his vest, which I'm going to keep in the olive range. So what I did is I just mixed up some green, sap green, raw sienna, threw a little bit of burnt sienna into it. Let me test this. Nope. God, I thought it was light enough. Bring some more ochre and maybe even a little Naples yellow light, and let's add. That's better. It's a little lighter. Feels lighter up on his shoulder, and it dissipates as it moves down into the rest of his vest. So we're going to let it go bright there, bright here, and as it moves down, we just want to kind of lose it. And then he's got a few darks down there. That's kind of a nice color. And I did this once before. It's how come I knew I wanted to use olive. In case you're wondering how I came up with that. I'm just looking at the harmony in the rest of the picture, and that robin's egg blue, which I refer to it as, is just not harmonious color-wise with the rest of the picture. Pretty vast, you guys. I mean, I'm sure some people go, well, I really like the color of the vest. You can make the color work. You just tone his flesh tones down. But I wanted to play with flesh tones. Yeah, me too. I think Jude wants to come up and finish this painting for me. And I got a feeling in a few years he just might. But you know what? I would never, ever force anyone into becoming an artist. Excuse me? Whoa. You guys hear it? I hope you're enjoying the hiccups that I'm hearing, because I'm certainly enjoying them. Put the top of this on, and a little bit of a warmth right there, and a little bit back in here. I haven't done anything to the sky. I want to do something with this edge. It bothers me a little bit, so I'm going to try something here. Just going to let this edge get lost like that. And then we'll go back and find it again. I like that better because as it goes down, I think this hat needs to come a little lower right here. Just darken it, add a little red to my dark color. And we'll do this. Just bring it a little lower. Feels better. I have too much light back here, right? So I can take this color right here and trim that light down. So we have just a hint of it. You know, I used to go up to pieces, and I used to look at pieces and wonder how an artist did that. Got those thin lines. How can you get those thin lines? And after making a bunch of mistakes, once again, that's how I learn, I think, by making mistakes. I began to realize that sometimes you don't have to put a thin line on. You put your line on, it can be as clumsy as can be, and you come back and trim it down. And in doing so, you make it appear that you put that line down when you didn't. You actually put a clumsier line down, and you came back and fixed it. Keep standing back. I want to clarify something right in here. I think what bothers me there is I think I can take the bridge of the nose and lighten this a little bit right here. After standing back, right decision. Right decision. Now, this is the stuff that you can spend hours on, just clarifying areas such as I did in the face. I will leave the face very often and then come back to it later. Pretty much, I want to let's get a little bit of the background in so it doesn't look totally incomplete. I like some of the looseness that's underneath it, but within those colors, spend a few minutes. Yeah, and then I'll go back at the very end and worry more about the subtleties. So I'm mixing up some kind of subtler, lighter greens. There, there. And in here, there's some sky holes coming up in here quite a bit. Let's throw some more raw sienna into that color. Let's clean that edge up now. It was clumsy before, now it's a firmer edge. Over in here a little bit, but it gets a lot warmer. I kind of like the warmth there. So I threw a little bit of I put a little bit of a raw sienna into it and way too much light. That's how come I ended up, I don't want to compete with that hat. A lot of variations, a lot of color, some warms back here. Got that part done. Want to get this all the way over here. Some of the gray. Some sky holes. A little bit of a tree trunk. Kind of like, oh, way too dark. I want it to sit back in the paint, not become too dominant. I think I can actually take a dark umber and blue. Just need it darker. Let me stand back. Okay. I can take that. Well, I've got that dark in my brush. So what you do is you get it in there in the beginning, and then you do adjustments. A little darker. Hopefully they're minor adjustments. You're not doing major adjustments as you proceed into the painting. You're doing minor adjustments. So now let's take and do the sky, which looks to me like to be a cooler version of this, which I kind of like that idea of it being a cooler version of that. So we're gonna take white, little Naples, a little ultramarine, too much ultramarine. Let's try this. It's good enough. I want to keep it. Remember, we talked about this right at the outset, that I wanted to keep a very loose, thin background. It was, a few things that help clarify and define it. But generally, the concept was to keep this background, for lack of a better word, a little more abstracted. Which so far I think I'm doing. What the heck was I doing there? Okay, let's bring it over here. Let's get a few sky holes. Gotta stand back for a second. It's fine. Don't want to. I really want to underdo it. I do see some weird warm colors sneak up in here, so I just took the same color, mixed it back into one of my warmer kind of flesh tone colors, and we'll add a little bit of color variation there, and maybe over in here, just a little bit here and there, just so it doesn't get too flat and boring. Okay, let's go down in here. There's a little bridge or something. I don't know that I'm going to paint that as clear as it is. I think I'm going to just kind of paint some interesting shapes that feel right about here. I've done this when I've painted figures with a lot of students in the room, and I'll use the students as kind of background shapes, but I don't try and define them as students, just kind of try and define them as nice marks. So let's take this, whatever this is, bring it over here. Let's leave that. Now let's look around, see if there's anything else I want to do. Maybe bring a couple of warms back in here. A couple of subtle darks, but not too much because I don't want it to overpower anything in the figure. The background should feel like something, but not necessarily be something. At least that's kind of what I was hoping for. I don't want it to be clarified. And you know, sometimes, and I don't care how this doesn't necessarily have anything to do with the fact that I'm painting quickly. Sometimes that's just what I might want. There's actually a little tile up there, that's why, and there is on right here too. So I can actually have a little fun and I like to look for these little color snaps that I can, without them being too dominant. Okay, so I'm going to go back to his face. Because where are we at? Yeah, we're about 15 minutes away. I don't have 40 things. This is kind of a leisurely stroll through a head painting, just simply because I don't have all those things that I'm usually looking at, trying to get them all in there. So it's more or less nuances within the head. Some of what I'm doing is, I know what to look for because I've painted a lot of heads, and I've painted a lot of heads from life. When you've done that, you tend to know what you need to do, what to look for in your model. And I will look back at the painting from time to time without looking at my reference, which I'm doing right now, and I'm saying, how do I feel about it? Does it look good? Is there something that I think I could do? And that goes back to what I've talked about a few times, is the evaluation process. And that evaluation process can be ongoing for a short period of time, weeks. So I've amplified some of the cools right there. Partly because I felt it needed it. I didn't see it. I see some light, but I know that I can get by with it on a male model. I probably couldn't get by with it on a female. So you can actually take more color chances on male models than you can, at least I have found, and particularly elderly models with tons of character. Threw a lot of warmth into that cheek. I kind of like it, but at the same time, I felt like as I stand back, I feel I can get a little bit more oomph, technical term, oomph, out of it. I want to clarify this light as it comes across the wing of the nostril and then up on the bridge of the nose. So I clarified that just a little bit more. I can also see that I could get by doing that same kind of thing down towards, I'm deciding on a color, that part of the lip. And I went cool on it, and I don't know if I want to keep it cool or if I want to warm it back up. I'm testing at this point, let's put it that way. A little bit of a better shape. They're too hard of an edge, way too hard. So what do you do when that happens? I like to just clean my brush, what I'm doing right here. So my brush is clean and I don't have a lot of paint coming off of it. Then I take the color and I just softly hit along the edge, and in doing so, I kind of blend the two together. Now the eye feels too large, and it's right here. It feels better. Coming down, I think I want to emphasize the warmth in that cheek, as it right here. So I added red, like a cad red hue. And then you stand back. Doesn't bother me too much. This bothers me a little bit. I think I went a little too cold quickly. So I'm going to scrape the color, this warm color. There we go, back into it. Sometimes you just use the color in your brush. All right, I added to that red, I added some Naples yellow, and the top part of the cheek, right up in here, it's a lot brighter. That helped. As I stand back, it feels better than it did. I like that when that happens, by the way. Let's see if I need to do anything in that ear. I haven't looked back at that for a while, huh? So we're going to take and amplify a little bit more of the structure. And with that nice red color, maybe a little more ochre into that color, I'm going to look, that could be brightened, I can see right now. But right about in here, it looks like I can go a little bit brighter. And as it comes down here, even right about there. So emphasize some of the character of this particular guy. Warm and light. Red, ochre, Naples yellow. Okay. I'm going to bring a little bit more light to the front plane here. Front plane of this area right there. And then the same kind of color keep getting back, keep subtly fixing things. Sometimes you put something in, you realize it doesn't work, you take it back out. So I added some Mars Violet Deep. I find that it's a neat color because it's dark. It's not too hot like the siennas are. It's similar in value, and it just sits nicely. Oh, keep testing. Not going light enough. It just there feels a little bit better. Subtlety. Now I'm going to look at the nose. There's something that bothers me in that nose. I just see what it is. So I'm going to take a lot of the Mars Violet Deep, clean my little finger, and I see the cast shadow that separates so I'm being a lot more careful. This area here bothers me, okay, as I stand back. And these are the kind of thought process that I'm going through as I'm adjusting. Okay, I'm going to do another thing that I just thought about when I stood back. I'm going to take more ochre, mix it into the green, ochre green, and a little bit of Naples. And definitely medium. And I'm going to try to brighten this even more. Ochre and Naples. This is probably too much, but why not go over the top? And it's mixing nicely into the paint that's already there. Look at that wonderful stroke. It's that beautiful wet into wet kind of look. So as we get closer to the face, you bring more life to things. As we move further from the face, I don't want to say you diminish life, but what you're doing is you're taking those areas and you're making them less pronounced. So, and you want a little bit more abruptness. So we're going to bring it down about here, over, down, and then we want to lose it about in here. Now we want to bring it down a little bit further. There we go. Color on color on color. Looking back up in here, I got this wonderful warmth that I can throw little, I don't know if those are flowers back there or what, but I love this little spots of warm accents that are almost arbitrarily back in there. And there's a little bit of a ground change of this plane right here. Just a dry brush. Sometimes that's all you need. Sometimes you don't need to go in there. And in this area, that's a little warmer than I wanted, but I wanted to add some more variation so it isn't too flat. That's too light. Definitely see it up here. But by doing it, you add, I've got the cools in. I went probably a little too cool, which was fine because every stage, I'm going to go back to something I've said over and over and over again. Every stage is a setup for the stage to follow. Keep that in mind. And what that simple concept does, it allows you to, as you're beginning your painting, to make bad decisions. Because it's basically something that will be underneath what you're going to end up doing as you progress. So a lot of times if you just think like that, it's a kind of a helpful way of keeping you from going in and making things too perfect too quickly. Dark, brown, a little blue, a little medium, a little clarification. Ready? Right there. Nice stroke. These are different bricks. And then there's a brick here. It looks like there's one about here. It looks like it gets darker and more scrubby in here, and some drips. A little bit more. So we bring a little life to it without clarifying it. Same here, a little bit of a tile right here on that roof. Got about 5 minutes. We're actually going to make it by 1:30. Good, because I'm supposed to go wine tasting when this is all over. Oh, fun little color accents that you sneak in. This, all right, I'm at the part of the painting that if you've basically got everything going pretty well, and that's kind of how I feel about this is pretty well, you start having fun. You can start trying some things, saying, well, maybe I can try this, see if this works. And if it doesn't, just get rid of it. You know, I say that over and over, and I don't think a lot of people, everyone wants, when you're first painting, everyone wants your painting to look perfect right from the beginning. It's not going to. It's not going to look perfect. It may look good, you know, may look okay, but you always have that opportunity to go back and carry it further, make it nicer, make it neater. So, I mean, my favorite thing to paint, truthfully, is figures. Although over the course of many years, I've become to really appreciate painting landscapes a lot more. So you know, as much as I enjoy figures to this day, and I love the challenge of a finished portrait. The difference between what I'm doing here and a finished portrait is on a finished portrait, I might spend 30 hours. I might spend 40 hours. Right? Simply doing things just as I did here, bringing them up much slower, going through many more stages to get to that light. I would go through a lot more stages, and I might even let it go lighter still, because I have the opportunity to do more evaluation time. And that is super crucial, everybody. I cannot, on a portrait, this is a much more spontaneous kind of painting. And it's kind of painting very often that artists will gravitate towards. But if you're doing a painting for a client, I usually find when it comes to portraiture that they want things looking just like, you're basically painting the person and flattering them. Did a lot of work, as the saying goes, back in the day for the entertainment industry, for the movies. Did a lot of movie stars, a lot of record albums, right? You don't just paint a painting and paint for character. You gotta flatter them. You gotta make them look. John Wayne, who's no longer with us, I was told that his orders to art directors when people were to paint him was to take 15 years and 50 pounds off. And I remember doing a painting, I think for Russia House of Sean Connery, and they gave me originally a photo to work from Russia House. I did the painting, and then they said, "Oh no, he looks too old." So then they said, they turned around and they grabbed an old James Bond photo of him, and they said, "Do the same painting, do this head, but put the beard on that he has now." And I don't know that was him that said that, by the way. That came from an art director. So it probably came from an agent. That's what I found when any of that occurs. I know the painting that I did for Frank Sinatra, the only thing he asked for, he was very happy with it, and the only thing he asked for was a little more hair on top, and not much. I mean, just a stroke or two did it, and he was very pleased, very happy. And I had I probably put too much reflected light under here and pronounced what none of us like, the double chin kind of a thing. None of us like that. I don't. And so it was just, literally one or two little strokes. But other than that, he was joy. He was really wonderful. Certain individuals have certain images of themselves and they want to portray that. And very often studios, want an image of a star to be a certain way because that's the way the star is. And so, they're thinking advertising. Got to keep that in mind. They're not just thinking, they're thinking advertising. And so that their ideas are based on that. They're not based on the kind of, whoops, boy, was that wrong. They're not based on the kind of aesthetics that we were trained. We were trained with certain aesthetics, and all of a sudden, oh, I like what I did there, son of a gun. All of a sudden, we're told, don't paint what you see, make it better, make it more attractive. And I'll tell you what, when I was a student at Art Center, I took a fashion class. That actually helped a lot. Nina Novinska was the teacher. And I learned a lot about flattering in that class, about elongating necks, firming up there we go, that helped a lot. Firming up chin lines, things of that nature. And so all of that was really eye-opening. And when I got into doing a lot of film work, I used a lot of that experience and knowledge that I got from from that one fashion class. And I thought about it often when I would work. You know, I would always hear her voice. I also took a fashion drawing class, I think with Mary Vartikian lady, and same kind of thing. Same kind of thing. Don't just copy what you see. Flatter, improve upon, and it's true to this day. It's true when I do portraits to this day. I think that way, and you know, I think when I look at John Singer Sargent, I'm sure he did that. When you look at, you know, you can look at some of his paintings and know he's elongated people. He's made beautiful hands. He made people's hands look like fashion statements all themselves. So, and you learn from the greats that came before you, and that's kind of, you know, on the shoulders of greats. So I'm not going to go much further. I think we're just about done. I could fuss on it. I would probably darken down in here. Then I might go back into the face and do a little bit more refinement up in here, kind of like what's going on up around the forehead and the eyebrow. Took me a while to get to it, but I kind of like what's happening in there. So here we've got the wonderful old gentleman from San Juan Capistrano. Everybody, when I was there, a lot of people said, oh, he's the mayor. And they didn't mean that in a way that he was literally the mayor, but I think it was, there's a fondness that this gentleman had. And, you know, I'm fortunately able to get, not only snap some photos, but had the opportunity to paint him. And this might be the last photo I have of him, so I may not do any more paintings of him unless I carry this painting a little further. But we are done. I've kept one rag in my hand, so I'm filthy. But gives you an idea of how some of the decisions that I made about looseness, tightness, things of that nature. You can always take one of your gesso brushes or any old big brush. You know, I have a bunch of different kinds of big brushes, and I'll grab one right here. One of these, and sometimes I'll take these and I'll just smear, just so I lose edges. Just because I don't want everything to be that clearly defined. So up in here, if you want to soften things, you can go back and push things around. And look, with that brush, I just barely grazed in things. Like in here, I don't like that. Maybe I want that edge softer. So in any event, you guys hopefully got something out of this headpiece, and look forward to next week, in which case I'll do something else. I don't know. I kind of look at an old barn right now. Happy painting. Happy Easter. Have a good weekend. And I'm vaccinated. I hope you guys get yours. Thank you all.